He was just a quiet mechanic in a small town living alone fixing engines and trying to outrun his past. Until one morning behind his garage, he found something he never expected. Two little girls, abandoned, afraid, and with that, everything began to change. But what came next, no one, not even him, could have seen coming. If stories about kindness, healing, and second chances speak to your heart, make sure to subscribe to our channel. There's so much more than meets the eye in this one. Now let's begin. A mechanic found twin, 8-year-old girls left by stepmom. Unaware, they'd become his everyday miracle. The morning sky over Sawyer Creek was low and gray, swollen with clouds that hadn't yet made up their mind whether to rain or sulk. Jack Rowan flipped the lock on the garage door, his fingers stiff from the late spring chill. The creak of the steel rolling up broke the morning silence, revealing the dim interior of his old auto shop, Rowan's Repairs, hand-painted in faded navy over the front. Jack's day had barely begun when a shrill voice cut through the quiet. "No, I don't care what your mother would have wanted. I'm not doing this anymore." Jack froze. The sound came from behind the garage, an alley where he stored junk parts and the occasional delivery. He took a slow step back and peeked around the corner. There they were. A woman mid-30s, sharply dressed in a cream blouse and heels that didn't belong anywhere near oil stains or gravel, was arguing with two young girls, twins, by the look of them. They couldn't have been older than 8, dressed in matching hand-me-down jackets, hair in messy braids. One clung to the other, trying not to cry. "I did what I could." The woman snapped, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "You think I asked for this? I'm not your mother. I was never meant to be." Jack stepped forward. "Everything all right here?" The woman turned, startled. Her gaze narrowed. "Mind your business, mechanic." He didn't flinch. "Hard to do when your business is unfolding in my backyard." She scoffed and turned back to the girls. "Let's go." Back in the car, but the older twin took a step back. "You said we were going to live with Aunt Rosie." "You lied." The woman's jaw clenched. "Aunt Rosie moved to Florida. And she stopped herself, shaking her head. "I can't do this anymore." Jack had seen a lot in his time: wrecked trucks, broken bones, a daughter's empty bedroom after the accident. But this hit different. "Lady," he said, voice calm but firm, "you don't get to leave 2 kids behind like they're last week's garbage. That's not how people work." She spun toward him, fire in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like to raise kids who aren't yours? To be stuck in a life someone else built and handed to you like a punishment?" Jack stepped closer. "Do you know what it's like to bury your wife and 6-year-old after a drunk driver blew a red light?" "I do. And I'd give anything to have one more breakfast with my little girl, even if she was screaming about the wrong kind of cereal." The woman faltered. Jack wasn't done. "You may not have asked for this life, but those girls didn't ask to be abandoned either. You want out, fine, but at least own what you're doing." She looked away, blinking fast. Jack pointed to the girls, now huddled silently behind a stack of tires. "They deserve better than a disappearing act and a box of excuses." The woman reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, worn, creased at the corners. Their birth certificates, social, insurance info, medical records. "I made copies." He stared at her, disbelieving. "You think this is easy for me?" she whispered. "I was 28 when their father married me. I didn't know what I was getting into. He died. I got stuck with debt with them, with everything. I tried. I really did. But I can't anymore." Jack looked at the girls. The younger one, her lip trembling, clutched a stuffed bear so worn it looked like it might unravel in the wind. He turned back to the woman. "There's a difference between being tired and being done. You're not tired, you're running." Silence stretched long between them. Then she placed the envelope on top of the tire stack, glanced once, only once, at the girls, and walked away. Jack called out, "Wait, what's their last name?" She didn't stop walking. "Morrison." And then she was gone, heels clicking down the alley car door, slamming engine roaring to life. Jack watched the SUV disappear into the distance. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly he turned to the girls. The older twin looked up. "Are you going to send us away too?" Jack crouched down, hands on his knees, careful not to startle them. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do yet, but I can promise this: you're not sleeping out here tonight." They didn't move. I'm Jack, he said gently. I fix broken things, but I'm guessing pancakes might help more than a wrench this morning. You hungry? The younger one nodded. Can we bring Teddy? Wouldn't dare leave him behind, Jack said, standing and holding the garage door open. They walked inside, two little girls and one man with a quiet house, a cluttered garage and a heart he thought had closed for good. He didn't know then that this was the moment everything changed. Not just for them, but for him too. He'd found two little girls at the edge of being forgotten, and in saving them, he had unknowingly begun saving himself. The house smelled like old motor oil and pine cleaner, a blend Jack hadn't noticed in years, until two pairs of small, uncertain feet walked across his hardwood floors. Mira and Lila followed him incautiously, clutching their small backpacks to their chests. Teddy, the threadbare stuffed bear, was tucked firmly under Lila's arm. Jack closed the front door behind them gently, like he didn't want to startle them. Maybe he didn't. It had been a long time since any children were in this house, 7 years to be exact. 7 years since Sarah's laughter had echoed down the hall. 7 years since the nursery down the corridor went dark and quiet. Shoes off at the door, he said softly, pointing to the mat. Not a rule, just a good habit. The girls complied without a word. He led them into the kitchen, a modest space with mismatched chairs and a fridge covered in dusty magnets from auto parts stores. Jack scratched his beard, then motioned toward the table. You two sit. I'll see if I remember how to make breakfast that doesn't come from a vending machine. Mira watched him closely, the way a wary pup might watch a stranger. Lila clutched Teddy tighter and slid onto a chair silently. Jack moved around the kitchen in clunky motions, opening cabinets, checking for flour, eggs, milk. He found an old box of pancake mix in the back of a shelf. Expired. Probably. But it would do. He cracked the eggs with more force than necessary, beat the mix in a bowl that had a chip on the rim. As the griddle warmed, he glanced back at the girls. Mira's eyes didn't leave him, so he said, voice casual, You two always hang out in alleys behind garages, or is today special? Lila's eyes darted to her sister. Mira gave a small shrug. She said she'd just be a minute. Then she left. Jack flipped the first pancake. It sizzled and curled at the edges. Where were you before that? He asked. Our house, Mira said. Sort of. It's not ours anymore. She sold it. She sold your house. Mira nodded. Said it was too big for just us. Said she was moving to California. Jack didn't say anything for a moment. He plated the first pancake and slid it across the counter. Then another. By the time he brought the food over, both girls were sitting upright, the scent of something warm and edible shifting the air. Pancakes might be a little lumpy, he warned. Mira poked hers with a fork. It's fine, Lila whispered. Thank you. Jack sat across from them and reached for his coffee. He hadn't even taken a sip before Mira looked up again. Are you going to call the police? That landed like a brick. He set his mug down carefully. Already did. Mira's face fell. They didn't show, he added. Not yet, anyway. Said someone would follow up. Paperwork, probably. You know how it is. She nodded solemnly, though she clearly didn't. Jack leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. You got any relatives, grandparents? Aunt Mira's lips pressed together. We used to have an Aunt Rosie. Used to. She got in a fight with her, moved to Florida. Doesn't call much. Jack tapped his fingers on the table. He was a mechanic, not a social worker, not a father, definitely not a lawyer. But he'd seen enough to know when someone was slipping through the cracks, and these girls were falling fast. He stood and walked to the phone on the wall, one of those ancient rotary models he refused to get rid of. Picked it up, dialed the sheriff's office. This is Jack Rowan, he said after the beep. You're going to want to send someone over. I've got 2 minors here, sisters, who've been left behind. No joke. I'll fill out whatever forms you need. He hung up, then turned back to the table. Mira's eyes were big. Are they going to take us away? Jack ran a hand down his face. I don't know. Will we have to go to one of those places? Lila asked, her voice tiny. Like on TV, Jack crouched down beside their chairs. Listen, I don't know what comes next, but I do know one thing: you're not going back out in that alley. Not today. Not on my watch. Mira blinked hard. Now finish your pancakes, Jack said, rising. If nothing else, you'll need the energy to teach me what 2nd graders eat for lunch these days. Still bologna and string cheese. Lila giggled just a little and Mira allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch upward. Jack collected the empty plates when they were done and stood at the sink staring out the window over the dry backyard where his daughter used to run barefoot in summer. He could almost hear her laugh light as wind chimes carried on the breeze. And now there were two more voices in his kitchen, two little souls whose lives had just been tossed aside like scrap metal. Jack dried his hands, glanced back at them. Mira was explaining something about a school project, while Lila carefully cleaned syrup off Teddy's ear. Maybe it was none of his business. Maybe it was a mistake. But somewhere deep inside, something had shifted. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But today, he was going to protect them, even if he didn't know how yet. By the time the county sheriff's deputy finally knocked on Jack's front door that afternoon, the girls had both fallen asleep, one on the worn-out couch in the living room, the other curled up under a fleece blanket on the floor beside her. Teddy the bear had been promoted to the honorary third guest of the impromptu nap. Jack opened the door quietly, his large frame blocking the view behind him. "Jack Rowan," the deputy asked, flipping open a weathered notepad. "That's me. Got a report of 2 minors found on private property. Abandonment suspected. Social services sent us out to do the initial assessment." Jack stepped out and closed the door behind him, lowering his voice. "They're inside, sleeping." The deputy, a tall, sandy-haired man in his 30s, with a badge that read, J. Wilson, nodded toward the house. "Mind if I come in?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Just don't wake him if you don't have to." Inside, Deputy Wilson took one look at the girls and softened. He crouched beside the couch, examined the scene. No signs of distress, no bruises, just 2 kids sleeping off the shock of being discarded. He stood up, sighing. "Social services will send someone out soon. You're not their guardian, so technically they're wards of the state until we sort this." Jack crossed his arms. "They don't belong in a system, deputy. They belong in a home." Wilson gave him a measured look. "That may be, but it's not your call. You're not family." That word family hit Jack like a wrench to the gut. He nodded stiffly. "So what do we do?" "You wait. That's the hard part." An hour later, the knock came again. A crisp, business-like rapping that didn't belong in a small town. Jack opened the door to a woman in a navy blazer and flats, holding a leather folder. Her ID badge read Evelyn Hart, Child Protective Services. She scanned Jack quickly, oil-stained jeans, a tired but steady gaze, strong hands that looked like they'd held both tools and pain. "I'm here for the Morrison children." Jack stepped aside, wordless. Evelyn entered like she'd done this 100 times, and she had. But something in the way Jack stood guard over the house like it held sacred ground made her pause. She spotted the girls still resting, and for the first time in hours, her voice softened. "How long have they been here since this morning?" "Found them behind my shop. Their stepmother left them." Evelyn took a slow breath. "You witnessed the abandonment?" Jack nodded, tried to stop her. She left a packet, papers, birth certificates. Said she was done. Evelyn scribbled notes, her posture stiff, professional. "Have you had contact with minors before?" Jack's brow furrowed. "You mean like a criminal record?" She glanced up, cool. "No, I mean parenting experience." Jack's jaw tightened. "Had a daughter. Sarah. She was 6. Died in an accident. 7 years ago." The pen in Evelyn's hand froze for a moment. She lowered her clipboard. "I'm sorry." Jack shrugged, eyes on the floor. "So yeah, I know how to keep a kid fed and warm. Might even remember how to braid hair if I try hard enough." Evelyn folded her arms. "That's not how custody works, Mr. Rowan. I'm not asking for custody." Jack's voice grew firm. "I'm asking for time. Time for them to have somewhere they're not afraid. Time for you to figure out where they belong. And until then, they can stay here." Evelyn looked at him, assessing. She wasn't easily moved. Years in the system had taught her that emotion often clouded judgment. But something in Jack's tone wasn't desperate or pleading. It was resolute. She stepped aside and quietly approached the couch. Mira stirred, blinking up at her. "Hi there," Evelyn said softly, crouching down. "My name's Evelyn. I work with families." Mira sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Are you taking us away?" "Not today," Evelyn said, glancing back at Jack. "But we're going to talk about what's best for you and your sister." Lila woke next, and Jack quietly handed each of them a glass of water. The girls clung to each other as Evelyn gently asked them questions. Name schools, what they remembered about the last few days. They answered honestly, if hesitantly. Evelyn noticed something then, how both girls looked to Jack after each question, as if seeking permission or safety. There was a bond forming already. After an hour, Evelyn stepped outside with Jack. "I'll file the report," she said. "Officially, they'll enter temporary care. But given the conditions, I can authorize a provisional placement with you for 48 hours. Jack let out a breath. "That's something. You'll need to come to the county office tomorrow morning. Fill out forms, submit fingerprints, background check." "Fine." She paused. "It's not going to be easy. The system's not built for improvisation." "I'm a mechanic," Jack replied. "Improvisation's how I keep half this town's cars from falling apart." Evelyn cracked the faintest smile. She handed him a card. "Call me if anything changes. Any problems, anything they say that worries you. They've been through more than most adults." Jack took the card and nodded. As she turned to leave, she looked back once more. "You sure about this?" "Nope," he said. "But I wasn't sure about being a dad the first time either. Still did it." She gave a slow nod and walked to her car. That night, Jack sat on the porch as the sky darkened, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Through the window, he could see Mira and Lila curled up on the couch, giggling softly at an old cartoon he'd put on. The sound of laughter, light fragile, filled a space in the house that had been empty for years. Jack didn't know what would happen tomorrow, or the day after. But as the stars began to prick through the sky, he realized something profound. Sometimes you don't find the people you're meant to save. Sometimes they find you. The morning sun filtered in through the faded curtains of Jack's living room, casting golden slats across the floorboards, and the two small figures still curled on the couch. Mira was the first to stir, blinking up at the ceiling with the wide-eyed confusion of someone waking in an unfamiliar world. Lila followed seconds later, rubbing her eyes and nestling deeper under the oversized flannel blanket Jack had found the night before. Jack had been up for hours. He'd stood at the kitchen sink, staring into his chipped coffee mug like it held answers, then paced the hall, then stood outside on the porch as dawn broke. For a man who prided himself on fixing things, cars, lawnmowers, the occasional toaster, this was a kind of broken he wasn't sure a wrench could touch. But as he stepped back inside and saw the girls sit up, hair-tangled cheeks pink from sleep, something in his chest stirred. It wasn't panic. It wasn't even fear. It was hope. Tentative. Uninvited. Dangerous. "Morning," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Do you have cereal?" Mira asked. I've got oatmeal," Jack replied. "That's old people cereal." Jack snorted, says the 8-year-old with syrup in her hair. Lila smiled, her head still resting on Teddy's belly. Jack moved to the kitchen. "I'll make toast and eggs." "That work?" Both nodded. As he cooked, the smell of butter and warm bread filled the house, a smell that hadn't lingered here since Sarah. After breakfast, Jack gave them a quick tour of the house. The living room with a sagging couch and an ancient television. The laundry room where the dryer squealed on every third spin. The back door that stuck unless you lifted it just right. And the guest room bare except for a futon and a dusty bookshelf. He paused outside Sarah's room. It had remained untouched for years. Frozen, a pink door with stickers that had faded and peeled. Inside, a bed with a unicorn bedspread, a wall covered in finger paintings and photographs. Tiny shoes still in the closet. He gripped the doorknob, then let it go. "I've got a room you can use," he said, leading them to the guest room instead. "It's not fancy, but I'll get you some blankets, and maybe we'll go shopping later. Get you some clothes that don't smell like motor oil." Mira looked around. "There's no pink." "Nope," Jack said, "but we can change that." The girls explored like timid guests at a museum. Mira inspected the bookshelf, pulling out an old Hardy Boys novel. Lila laid Teddy on the futon and smoothed the covers. Jack knelt beside them. "You girls okay with staying here another night?" Mira nodded slowly. "Better than a group home." Lila asked, "Are we going to school?" Jack blinked. "Do you want to go?" Lila shrugged. "Just wondering." "I'll talk to Miss Evelyn about it," Jack said. "Maybe you can go back next week. Right now, we're just figuring things out." That afternoon, Jack drove them to the local Walmart in his dusty blue pickup truck. It still had a cracked windshield from a hailstorm 3 summers ago. The girls climbed in their legs, barely reaching the floor. "You'll want to buckle in," Jack said, reaching over to adjust Lila's strap. My truck rattles like a can of soda in a paint mixer. Walmart was a sensory explosion after the quiet of Jack's home. The fluorescent lights, the beeping registers, the loudspeaker announcing rollbacks. Lila held onto Mira's hand the entire time. Jack pushed the cart, feeling awkward, like someone wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. He paused in front of the girl's clothing aisle. "All right," he said. "Go wild." Mira gave him a look. "How wild are we allowed to go? Let's keep it under $50 wild." They each picked out a few t-shirts, a hoodie, jean socks. Lila quietly grabbed a pack of pastel scrunchies. When Jack noticed, he added a hairbrush to the cart. Then on impulse, he tossed in a set of glittery nail polish. Mira raised her eyebrows. "That's not very mechanic of you." Jack smirked. "You'd be surprised." At the checkout, the clerk gave them a curious look but said nothing. Jack paid in cash. Outside, as he loaded the bags into the truck, Mira asked the question that had been hanging over them since the day before. "Why are you helping us?" Jack didn't answer right away. He closed the tailgate, dusted off his hands, and leaned against the truck. "Because someone left you behind like you didn't matter," he said finally. "And I know what that feels like." Mira looked up. "Who left you my future?" Jack said simply, "When my daughter died, I stopped making plans." The wind kicked up a little, rustling the paper bags. "But then you two showed up," he added. "And now it feels like maybe there's a tomorrow again." Mira didn't say anything, but when they got back into the truck, she reached over and took his hand for just a second, then let go. That night after dinner, Jack stood outside Sarah's old room again. His hand rested on the doorknob. Inside was everything he'd locked away. The memories, the ache. The birthday card still taped to the dresser. He opened it slowly. The room smelled faintly of strawberry shampoo and old wood. Dust had settled on every surface. He stepped inside, picked up a framed photo of Sarah, with a gap-toothed grin holding up a toy wrench beside his old Mustang. "Hey, kiddo," he whispered. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress creaking under his weight. His voice cracked. "I think I've got more to give." He didn't stay long, just long enough to say it out loud. Then he closed the door, walked back to the guest room where Mira and Lila were brushing their teeth and said, "Hey, I was thinking tomorrow we could paint your room. Any color you want." Mira grinned. "Even purple," Jack nodded. "Even purple." And for the first time in a very long while, the house didn't feel like it belonged to the past. It felt like home. The next morning came soft and cool with the early light seeping through the windows like a whispered promise. Jack stirred awake before the girls did, but he didn't move. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan turning above him, listening to the faint sound of footsteps padding across the hallway, tiny barefoot steps. One set stopped in the kitchen. A pause, then the rustle of a cereal box. He smiled. By the time he emerged, Mira was already pouring milk into two mismatched bowls, and Lila was setting the table with 2 spoons and folded napkins. Teddy sat in a booster seat made from an old cushion. "We figured you deserved a break," Mira said proudly. "So, breakfast is on us." Jack lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Well, I'm honored." They ate quietly, the silence not heavy but warm, like a sweater you pull around you on a chilly morning. Jack thought about how quickly the house had changed. It wasn't just the voices or the mess of toys starting to collect in corners. It was the way the air felt less hollow, more human. After breakfast, Jack made a call to Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. "How are they doing?" she asked. "Better than I am, honestly," Jack said, rubbing the back of his neck. They took over the kitchen. "I think Teddy has his own seat now." Evelyn chuckled on the other end. "That's promising." There was a pause. "Listen," Jack said. "What's the next step? I mean, I know this isn't permanent, but the girls are settling in. I don't want to pull the rug out from under them." Evelyn's voice sobered. "Technically, the state can place them in foster care as early as this week. There's a family in Wichita with space and credentials. Stable, middle-income, good people." Jack leaned against the fridge, frowning. "So you're saying a stranger with a clean background and a 2-car garage is more qualified than someone who's already here, already caring for them?" Jack. Evelyn began. "I get it," he said. "Rules are rules. But these girls aren't car parts. They're not interchangeable." Another pause. "I'll see what I can do," Evelyn said at last. "There's an emergency placement petition we can explore. But I need more than sentiment. I need structure, proof you can provide legally and emotionally." "You'll have it," Jack said. Later that day, Jack took the girls on a drive out of town. It wasn't far, just 10 minutes past the last gas station and up a gravel path to a ridge overlooking a long stretch of golden plains. He parked the truck and helped them climb into the bed where he'd tossed in a couple of old quilts. The girls sat side by side, shoes off, legs dangling over the edge. The breeze tousled their hair as they looked out at the sea of wheat and sky. Jack pulled out a small picnic bag. Figured peanut butter and jelly taste better with a view. They smiled and dug in. After a while, Mira asked, "Do you come here a lot?" Jack shook his head. "Used to, with my daughter. She liked counting clouds." Lila leaned against his shoulder. "Do you still count them?" "No," he said softly. Stopped for a long time. She looked up at him. "You can start again. With us." Something caught in his throat. He swallowed it down. "I think I just might." The next morning brought a letter from the county office. Jack opened it with a flicker of dread. It was official. A foster placement had been scheduled for Friday. He didn't tell the girls. Not yet. Not when Lila was drawing a picture of our new room with purple walls and glow-in-the-dark stars. Not when Mira was organizing a library from Jack's dusty box of old books. That night, Evelyn stopped by the house. She stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, watching the girls in the living room as they played with a cardboard fort Jack had helped them build. One side of the fort had a label in crayon, "The Garage Castle." "They call this home now," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "Because it is." Evelyn sighed. "I talked to the director this morning. Legally, there's nothing preventing the transfer." But emotionally, she turned to him. "This is one of the few times I've seen kids relax this fast. They're laughing, drawing, sleeping through the night." Jack looked at her. "So fight for them." "I am," she said, then hesitated. "But I need one thing from you. Name it. Come to the placement review on Thursday. Don't just talk about love or intention. Show the board you have a plan, a room, financials, long-term care. This can't be off the cuff anymore." Jack gave a slow nod. "Then I'll be ready." That night, long after the girls had gone to bed, Jack sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and calculator. He wrote down everything: the garage's modest income, his savings account, the loan he'd paid off 2 years ago. He drew up a plan to convert the spare bedroom into a permanent shared space for the girls, called in a favor from a local friend who owned a secondhand furniture shop, and then he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Not in the church-going, sermon-reciting way, but a quiet, honest plea into the dark. "If I get this shot, I won't waste it." Upstairs, the house was quiet, but not empty. Never empty again. In the hallway, 2 small backpacks hung neatly by the door. In the living room, Teddy rested beside a drawing of Jack with a big smile and the words, "He's not Dad. Yet." Jack smiled through wet eyes. Friday might come with its papers and its protocols, but tonight they were a family. The county building stood like an aging monolith, gray square, and utilitarian, as if designed to strip emotion from whatever passed through its doors. Jack hated it on sight. He walked in wearing a clean button-up and jeans without oil stains, which for him was the equivalent of a tuxedo. He held a manila folder under one arm filled with paperwork, budget calculations, notes on the girls' routines, even photos of their makeshift room back at the house. He'd done his homework, and he was ready. But part of him still knew logic, and love didn't always weigh the same in the eyes of a system. Evelyn met him in the lobby, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, clipboard in hand. "You showed up," she said, as if she had half expected him not to. "I said I would." She offered a small smile. "You clean up well. Don't get used to it. This shirt itches." They walked down a corridor lined with outdated posters about child welfare and overcrowded foster networks. Jack read them sideways, his jaw clenched. "I've read the profiles of the Wichita family," Evelyn said, keeping her tone neutral. "They're good people. But so are you, Jack. The board just needs to believe that." Jack stopped. "Do you believe it?" Evelyn turned to face him. "I believe those girls feel safe with you. And for children who've been through what they have, that's not something we dismiss lightly." She hesitated, then added, "And I believe that when a man who's built his life around fixing broken things decides to take in 2 more, he deserves a chance." Jack's mouth tugged at one corner. "I didn't ask for them. You didn't have to." They entered the boardroom, 6 people at a long table, a county judge, a representative from family services, a psychologist, 2 foster program coordinators, and a legal aide. At the far end sat an empty chair for the stepmother, who hadn't bothered to show. Jack sat where he was told. Evelyn stood beside him, flipping through her notes with methodical precision. The judge, a gray-haired woman with reading glasses, cleared her throat. "Mr. Rowan, you've requested temporary guardianship of Mira and Lila Morrison, pending further review." "Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Jack said. "I've been caring for them the past few days since their stepmother left them behind. I'd like to keep doing that." "On what grounds?" Jack slid the manila folder forward. "I've documented everything: income, house layout, support network plans for education and healthcare. I'm not rich, but I'm stable. And more importantly, they already call my place home." The psychologist, a soft-spoken man in his 40s, interjected. "You understand the emotional responsibility involved: trauma bonding, abandonment, trust issues. These are not light matters." Jack nodded. "I'm not here because it's easy. I'm here because I care. Those girls came into my life with nothing. No security, no love, no idea where they belonged. And in a few days, we've built something. I feed them, I read to them. I know how they take their eggs and which one hates bedtime more." He paused, voice firm. "They're not guests anymore. They're mine, whether the paperwork says so or not." Silence settled around the room like a blanket. The legal aide scribbled something. One of the coordinators shifted uncomfortably. Then the judge turned to Evelyn. "Ms. Hart, your report." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice clear. "Mr. Rowan has no prior criminal history. He has a stable tax-paying business. The children appear emotionally bonded to him in a way that is rare for children this recently displaced." She took a breath. "In fact, Mira has already referred to him as Dad in passing, unprompted." Jack swallowed hard. That word still stunned him. But Evelyn continued, "There is one concern." She set down a folder of her own. Their case file. The stepmother's record was incomplete. She was not their legal guardian, just assigned physical custody after the father's death. "There's been no attempt to locate next of kin on the maternal side?" The judge frowned. "You're saying their legal custody transfer may not have been valid?" Evelyn nodded. "It's possible these girls were technically never meant to be under the stepmother's sole care." That sent a buzz through the room. "However," she added, "the fact remains they were abandoned. Mr. Rowan stepped in when no one else did. Legally, ethically, emotionally, he has acted in the children's best interest." The judge studied Jack. "And what if next of kin emerges? Would you be willing to facilitate visitation or even eventual custody transfer?" Jack's answer was immediate. "If it's in their best interest, yes. But unless that person's already standing at my door with open arms and a heart full of love, I'm not handing them over." The judge leaned back, thoughtful. "Thank you," she said. "We'll review the material and make a decision by tomorrow." Outside, the sky had turned slate gray. A storm was building on the horizon. Evelyn and Jack stepped onto the sidewalk. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Jack exhaled. "I felt like I was being cross-examined by a firing squad." "You held your own." He glanced at her. "That file you brought in, how'd you know to check her custody records?" Evelyn hesitated, then said quietly, "Because years ago, I worked for the corporate office where the stepmother had a financial fraud case. I remembered her name when you first called." Jack stared at her. "You're saying—" "You knew her. I never met her personally," Evelyn said. "But I helped report her. My testimony helped launch the internal investigation. She lost her job. That may have been the start of everything that spiraled for her and for the girls." Jack folded his arms, the pieces slowly fitting together. "So that's why this case matters to you." She nodded, eyes distant. "I've spent a long time believing I just did my job. But maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe I should have looked closer, seen more." He studied her a moment. "You're trying to fix something broken, too." Their eyes met. No judgment, no pity, just mutual understanding. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turned to go. "I'll call you when I hear from the judge." Jack watched her walk away, rain just starting to kiss the pavement around her. He stood still, letting the drops land on his face, mixing with the warmth behind his eyes. Maybe no one could undo the past. But sometimes, 2 people who once saw the cracks could still choose to patch them together, one act of redemption at a time. Friday morning arrived heavy with anticipation. The girls knew something was up. Kids always did, even when adults tried to smile through it. Jack had told them just enough that someone important had to decide whether they'd keep staying with him. He left out the anxiety, the racing thoughts, the hours he spent pacing the hall after they'd gone to sleep. When the phone rang just after 8 a.m., he lunged for it like it might disappear if he hesitated. Jack Rowan, Evelyn's voice said calm but tight. The board approved your emergency placement petition. You have official temporary guardianship, 30 days renewable pending home inspection, and continuing review. Jack exhaled so hard he nearly laughed. So that's a yes. It's a start, she said. But yes, they're yours for now. For now's better than never. You'll get paperwork by courier later today. Sign, return it. And Jack, yeah, do something to make today feel normal. For them. He looked over to the living room where Mira and Lila sat cross-legged, silently watching cartoons, their bowls of cereal mostly untouched. Got it. That afternoon, Jack borrowed his neighbor's van, the one with all the seat belts that didn't rattle, and took the girls into town. They didn't go far, just a couple of blocks to the town square, where the library was hosting a children's book drive, and some volunteers from the community theater were reading aloud from a giant illustrated version of Charlotte's Web. Mira was captivated by the story. Lila, more reserved, curled into Jack's side while he held Teddy in one arm and pointed out where Wilbur was hiding on each oversized page. A local baker set up a table handing out cookies shaped like storybook characters. Jack let the girls pick two each, even though Mira tried to sneak a third. He didn't mind. It was the first time he'd heard her giggle like a child, not just a survivor. Afterward, they walked past a small art stand where kids could draw pictures to be displayed in the library window. Mira dove in immediately, grabbing a fistful of markers. Lila hesitated. Jack crouched beside her. Not your thing, she shrugged. I'm not good at drawing. Neither am I, Jack said. That's why I work on engines. They make sense. Lila tilted her head. But you still try, he nodded. Yep. And sometimes the mess turns into something pretty. She chose a blue crayon. By evening, the living room looked like a tornado had spun through a stationery store. Crayons, paper scraps, glue sticks, and stickers were everywhere. Jack didn't care. On the table lay two masterpieces, one by Mira, which included a meticulous recreation of their garage castle fort, complete with a smiley Jack labeled Mr. Pancakes. The other was Lila's, a simple drawing of 4 stick figures, one holding a teddy bear, all beneath a purple roof. It was labeled Home. Jack didn't say anything. He just quietly pinned both to the refrigerator, right where Sarah's spelling test used to go. Late that night, Jack was doing dishes when a soft knock came at the door. He dried his hands and opened it to find Evelyn standing there with her clipboard hair down for the first time, looking tired. I know it's late, she said, but I wanted to drop off the original paperwork myself. Figured you'd want to see it in black and white. He took the envelope, flipping through the documents. It's real. It's real, she confirmed. She stepped inside. The girls were asleep upstairs, finally comfortable enough to sleep in the bedroom Jack had spent all week remodeling, with borrowed furniture and freshly painted walls in exactly the shade of purple they'd picked. Smells like lemon cleaner and pancakes, she guessed, eyeing the kitchen. Jack chuckled. They like routines. I'm still figuring out what mine is. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch. You're doing well. Better than some licensed foster homes I visited. Jack sat across from her. You came all this way just for a file. She hesitated, and to check on something else. He raised an eyebrow. I looked into their stepmother's financial trail again. She's in Nevada now. No forwarding address, no phone. She's completely off the radar. Jack's jaw tightened. So she just disappears and the girls are supposed to forget. No, Evelyn said. But you're not her, Jack. And what you're doing now, that matters. You're rewriting what their story could have been. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work. I didn't ask for this. I know, but I think I'm grateful it found me. Evelyn stood, smoothing her slacks. I'll be back next week for the first formal inspection. But between now and then, keep doing what you're doing. Jack walked her to the door. Before she stepped out, she turned. You ever wonder why people like us get pulled into other people's stories all the time? And Jack thought for a second. I think we're meant to help them write a better ending. Evelyn smiled. Good night, Mr. Pancakes. He laughed softly as she left. Later that night, Jack passed the girls' room on the way to his own. The door was ajar, the nightlight casting a warm glow. Mira was asleep, arm flung across the covers, one leg hanging off the bed, like a puppy sprawled after a long day. Lila lay quietly beside her, eyes open. Jack stepped in and knelt down. Can't sleep. She shook her head. He waited. After a long silence, she whispered, "Do we have to go somewhere else next weekend?" Jack reached over and gently tucked Teddy under her arm. "No," he said. "Not if I can help it." She looked at him with that serious gaze only small children have, the kind that somehow sees everything, even what you're trying to hide. "Then I'm going to sleep now, because tomorrow's going to be a good day." Jack smiled. "It is." He closed the door gently and stood in the hallway for a while, listening to the soft, even breath of two children who no longer flinched in their sleep. The storm had passed, and what remained wasn't wreckage. It was the beginning of something whole. The following week unfolded with a rhythm that surprised even Jack. The house no longer echoed with silence. Instead, it pulsed with the gentle chaos of routine morning cereal debates, mismatched socks, spontaneous dance parties in the hallway, and the constant, unmistakable hum of belonging. Jack had always thought of himself as a solitary man. After the accident, he'd gotten good at keeping the world at arm's length. But now there were shoes by the door that didn't belong to him, glitter on the kitchen counter, and two little toothbrushes in a cup beside his own. And he couldn't imagine the place without them. Then came Tuesday afternoon, an ordinary day, until Evelyn knocked again, her expression unreadable. He ushered her into the kitchen where Mira and Lila were building a towering structure out of cereal boxes and duct tape. Teddy sat atop it like a conquering king. Evelyn smiled at the scene but didn't linger. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. "Alone." Jack's stomach turned. He nodded and led her onto the porch where the late afternoon sun was just beginning to soften. Evelyn took a breath. "We've had a formal request from another party interested in long-term placement." Jack's chest tightened. "Another family?" She shook her head. "Not a family. A man. Someone who claims to be the girl's biological uncle. Their mother's brother name's Connor Rayner. He lives in Denver. Apparently, he only recently learned of his sister's passing." Jack crossed his arms. "And he just shows up now. He says he's been working abroad for several years. Non-profit work in South America. He claims he had no idea the girls were even in his sister's custody, let alone abandoned." Jack frowned. He didn't call. He didn't write. Just shows up when it's convenient. Evelyn didn't respond. "I get it," Jack said after a moment, a voice tight. "He's family. That makes him a better option than some washed-up mechanic who's only had them for a few weeks, right?" "That's not what I'm saying. It's what the system thinks." She looked at him squarely. "I'm not the system." Jack was silent. Evelyn continued. "Connor's coming in for an in-person meeting next week. He wants to see the girls under supervision. The board hasn't made a decision yet, but if his background checks out, he may have a legal claim." Jack stared out at the dusty road beyond his front gate, every muscle in his body straining to stay still. "I knew this was temporary," he said finally. "You told me." "I knew. But knowing," Evelyn said gently, "doesn't make it easier." He nodded, jaw clenched. They stood in silence, the air between them, thick with everything neither of them could fix. Before she left, Evelyn reached into her satchel and handed him a thin file. "This is all we have on Connor. Read it. And Jack, if you want to contest his claim, you have every right to do so. I'm not trying to fight someone just to win." "No," she said. "But you might have to fight if you want to keep what's already yours." Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after the girls had gone to bed, the file open in front of him. Connor Rayner, 39, nonprofit administrator, no criminal record, no signs of negligence, no history of abuse, graduated from Stanford, letters of recommendation from organizations in Ecuador and Argentina, a man who on paper seemed like a hero. Jack stared at the final page, a scanned photo of Connor smiling in front of a schoolhouse, somewhere overseas surrounded by kids. He closed the folder and pressed his palms to his eyes. By all accounts, this man had done good things in the world. But had he ever cleaned pancake syrup off a stuffed bear? Had he ever carried a child to bed after she fell asleep reading Charlotte's Web? Had he ever been called dad by someone who didn't have to say it? Jack doubted it. 2 days later, the local community center held its annual spring festival. Evelyn had encouraged Jack to take the girls, let them be kids, she'd said. Let the town see the family you're becoming. So he did. He held Lila's hand as they wandered through the booth's face-painting sack races, a makeshift petting zoo. Mira convinced him to let her ride a pony named Clover, and he nearly had a heart attack when she let go of the reins to wave. People watched them. Jack could feel it, the curiosity, the whispers. But no one said anything negative. In fact, a few neighbors nodded as they passed. Mrs. Caldwell from down the road gave the girls a bag of kettle corn just because. Officer Wilson stopped by with stickers and a wink. And then at the center of the square came the stage. The MC called for volunteers for the Junior Voices portion of the festival, an open mic for kids to share stories, jokes, poems, anything they liked. To Jack's horror, Mira's hand shot up. "You sure?" he whispered. She grinned. "You said try everything once, remember." Minutes later, Mira stood at the microphone, slightly too short for it. Someone adjusted the stand. She took a breath. "My name's Mira Morrison," she said, "and this is about our home." Jack stood frozen, heart pounding. She continued. "We used to live in a house that didn't feel like a home. Then we lived nowhere. Now we live with a man named Jack. He's not our real dad, but he makes pancakes even when he burns them. He reads bedtime stories with silly voices. He fixes stuffed cars, broken chairs, feelings." A ripple of laughter and soft murmurs ran through the crowd. "He didn't ask to be our dad," Mira said, her voice steady. "But I think his heart did. And that's what matters." Silence. Then applause. Loud. Genuine. Some people even stood. Jack felt his throat tighten, his hands trembling. And right then he knew something deeper than any court ruling or file could define. He hadn't just become a father again. He'd been chosen. By two girls who needed someone, and by a heart he hadn't known still had room to grow. The morning of Connor Rayner's scheduled visit arrived like a storm cloud that refused to break. Jack had barely slept. His house now peppered with signs of little lives, purple drawings, glitter glue on the windowsill. A tiny sock abandoned near the couch suddenly felt vulnerable, as if everything he'd built could be taken apart in one legal signature. The girls didn't know yet. He couldn't bring himself to tell them. Not until he was sure what the outcome might be. Until then, they deserved their morning cartoons, their maple syrup, their giggles over whose turn it was to feed the neighbor's cat. At precisely 10 a.m., a black sedan pulled into the driveway. Jack stood on the porch, hands buried in his back pockets, as a tall, lean man in a pressed blue shirt stepped out. Connor Rayner. He was about Jack's age, maybe a few years younger, with neat hair, confident posture, and the kind of polished aura that screamed global conferences and organic espresso. Jack hated him instantly. Mr. Rowan Connor approached with a tight smile and extended hand. "Thanks for agreeing to let me visit." Jack shook it, brief, firm, didn't agree to much. "But come on in." Evelyn arrived a minute later, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable. She'd requested to be present for the visit, and Jack hadn't objected. He was grateful, truth be told. This was new ground, and Evelyn, for all her formality, had become something like a compass in this strange, shifting terrain. The girls were in the backyard when the adults entered the living room. Jack gestured toward the sliding door. "They're out there. You can meet them, but I'll be close. They don't know who you are." Connor nodded. "Of course." Evelyn gave Jack a glance. "Would you like me to do the introduction?" "No," Jack said. "I've got it." He stepped outside, heart pounding, and called, "Hey girls, can you come in for a second?" Mira and Lila came running, sun-kissed and breathless. "We got Teddy his own sun chair," Mira declared proudly. Jack knelt to their level. "Girls, there's someone here who says he's your uncle, your mom's brother. He didn't know what happened until recently and wanted to meet you." The light in Mira's eyes dimmed just a little. Lila blinked up at him. "Is he nice?" Jack swallowed hard. "I don't know. That's what we're here to find out." The girls stepped into the living room. Connor offered a warm, restrained smile. "Hi, Mira." "Hi, Lila. I'm your Uncle Connor. I'm really sorry we haven't met until now." The girls said nothing. "I live in Denver," he continued, crouching to be eye level. "I've been working in South America helping build schools. I didn't even know your mom had passed. I didn't know you needed family." Still silence. Then Mira said, "We already have family." Connor's smile faltered. "I know. I've heard a lot about Mr. Rowan, and I think he's done a wonderful job. I just wanted to get to know you, maybe take you to the park or out for lunch sometime. Lila glanced at Jack. Can he do that? Only if you're comfortable, Jack said, his voice calm even. Evelyn stepped in gently. Why don't we all sit down for a few minutes? They moved into the dining room, the girls on either side of Jack, Connor across from them, and Evelyn nearby. The conversation tried to flow. Connor asked about school, their favorite books, what they liked to eat. Mira answered cautiously. Lila stayed quiet, drawing circles on the table with her finger. At one point, Connor said, I brought some pictures of your mom when she was younger. Would you like to see them? That got their attention. He pulled out a slim leather photo wallet and unfolded it. There, in a grainy, sun-washed photo, was a young woman with dark curls and a crooked smile holding a kitten in her arms. Another photo showed her laughing with a much younger Connor, the resemblance unmistakable. That's her, Mira whispered. Lila leaned in. She looks happy. Connor nodded, eyes dampening. She was. She loved you so much. A long silence fell, not awkward, but thick with memory and mystery. Finally, Mira looked up and said, Why didn't you come sooner? Connor hesitated. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. But now that I do, I want to be part of your lives, however I can be. Jack stood quietly collecting the empty glasses. They're not part-time kids, Connor looked up. And I'm not trying to uproot them? Aren't you? Jack turned slowly. You've been here an hour. I've been here through nightmares, dentist visits, first days back at school. You're a stranger no matter how good your intentions. I'm their blood. Jack's voice dropped steady as an engine hum. And I'm the one who held them when they cried. The words landed with weight. Connor didn't reply. Evelyn stood between them. Let's take a break. Emotions are running high. After Connor left politely with the promise of calling again, Jack stayed quiet for most of the afternoon. He watched the girls chase fireflies in the backyard, watched Mira sit on the tire swing and think, watched Lila quietly braid her sister's hair. That night, as he tucked them into bed, Lila asked the question he'd been dreading. Are we going to live with Uncle Connor now? Jack sat on the edge of the bed, took her hand. I don't know what the state will decide, but I know this, what we've built here. That's real. That's not going anywhere. Mira sat up. Would you fight for us? Jack met her gaze. I already am. They didn't say anything else. But when he kissed them goodnight, Lila whispered, We'll fight too. And Jack, alone in the hallway afterward, let himself lean against the wall and finally exhale. They weren't just his to protect anymore. They were choosing him right back. A family not by blood, but by something deeper, by love, by loyalty, by the quiet, everyday miracle of staying. The town's annual spring picnic arrived like a celebration of renewal itself. The sun, mild and generous, poured light across the green slope of Lawson Park. The smell of barbecue mingled with the sweetness of funnel cakes, while music from a live country band floated through the air like a memory in the making. Families gathered under awnings and on picnic blankets, laughing, playing cornhole, sipping lemonade. Jack hadn't planned on going. He'd never been a crowd person, especially not since Sarah. But Mira had begged, Please, Jack, everyone at school's going. They even have sack races. When Lila looked up at him with hopeful eyes and added softly, And there's face painting, his resistance collapsed. So here he was, pressed jeans, a clean flannel, and the girls on either side of him as they wandered through the crowd. Mira had a blue butterfly painted on one cheek, and Lila held a paper crown she'd made at the arts table. Teddy naturally was tucked under her arm with a matching crown of his own. Jack wasn't sure when they'd gone from calling him Mr. Jack to just Jack. He hadn't corrected it. In fact, he found it endearing, comfortable. It felt like their own kind of nickname, not forced, just theirs. But something about today felt different, like the strings tying them together were about to pull taut into something bigger, something that couldn't be undone. They reached the central lawn where a temporary stage had been erected. A local teacher with a megaphone announced, And now time for our special segment, Junior Voices Kids who'd like to share a story, a poem, a song, come line up by the stage. Mira gasped, Can I, Jack, please? He chuckled. You don't even know what you're going to say. She grinned. I do. I've been working on something. He blinked. You what? But she was already racing toward the line sneakers, kicking up tufts of grass. Jack glanced down at Lila. She planned that, he muttered. Lila nodded solemnly. She likes surprises. 5 minutes later, Mira climbed onto the stage, the microphone comically large in front of her. The MC adjusted it, and Mira took a breath. The crowd settled. My name's Mira Morrison, she began, voice clear and sure. And I want to tell you about pancakes. There was a ripple of confused laughter. When my sister and I first came to live with Jack, he made pancakes. They were too thick and kind of burnt. He forgot the syrup until halfway through, and he dropped one on the floor. But we didn't care, because it was the first time in a long time someone made something just for us. The lawn quieted. He reads us stories at night and lets us pick the voices. He lets me decorate the fridge with drawings even though it makes the kitchen look messy. He fixed Lila's favorite stuffed animal. He tells me when I'm being too loud, but he never tells me I talk too much. Jack's throat tightened. He didn't ask to be our dad, Mira said softly, but his heart did. And we call him that now, because that's what he is. The microphone caught a sharp inhale somewhere near the front row. Evelyn. The crowd was hushed, a few murmurs, a few sniffles. Mira finished with a smile. So, this story is about pancakes and how they helped us find home. The applause that followed was thunderous. Jack didn't move. Couldn't. Not until Lila slipped her small hand into his. Can I call you Dad too? She asked, barely above a whisper. He turned to her, something catching behind his eyes. You can call me anything you want, she smiled. Then I want to call you Daddy. His heart swelled, broke, and healed all at once. That evening, the three of them sat on the hood of Jack's old truck, parked at the edge of the picnic grounds, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Evelyn joined them, a soda in one hand, her blazer, long-gone hair loose in the breeze. She's got stage presence, Evelyn said. Might be a future senator. God help us, Jack muttered, but his smile betrayed him. Evelyn grew quiet. I spoke to Connor. Jack stiffened. He's stepping back. Jack turned to her, stunned. What he said, he saw what he needed to, heard what he needed to. He doesn't want to take them out of a home that's already theirs. Jack exhaled slowly, staring at the horizon. I didn't expect that. He said you were right, Evelyn added. They're not part-time kids. For a moment, none of them spoke. The golden hour painted everything in soft, forgiving light. Evelyn sipped her drink. He'd like to stay in touch. Holidays, birthdays, maybe visit once in a while. Jack nodded. I can live with that. He looked down at Mira, who had fallen asleep with her head on his knee, and at Lila, still clutching Teddy, fighting to stay awake. You still want to push the adoption through? Evelyn asked. Jack looked at her, emotion thick in his voice. With everything I've got. Evelyn smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it wasn't guarded or professional. It was something warmer. Human. Then we'll get started Monday. Jack looked up at the fading sky. The air was still. The girls were safe. And for the first time in a long, long while, he wasn't just fixing things. He was building something. A family. Not with perfect tools, but with steady hands. And more than enough love to hold it together. Sunday morning arrived quietly with a crispness in the air that hinted at the turning season. The kind of morning where you wanted to linger in pajamas, make too much coffee, and let the hours pass like soft river water. Jack stood at the kitchen stove flipping pancakes, his new specialty, as the girls had deemed it. He no longer burnt the edges, and he'd learned to add cinnamon to the batter just the way Mira liked. Lila preferred her pancakes cut into hearts. Jack didn't ask why. He just did it. The girls sat at the table coloring while the radio hummed an old Johnny Cash tune. You think we could build a real treehouse this summer? Mira asked, glancing up. One with a ladder and maybe, like a telescope. Jack flipped a pancake. What kind of budget are we talking here, NASA or lemonade stand lemonade? She giggled. But a big lemonade stand, like 2 jars. I'll see what I can do, he said, smiling. The knock on the door came just as they were pouring syrup. It wasn't sharp or urgent, just steady, like someone with purpose. Jack wiped his hands and opened it to find Reuben Callahan, the town's retired high school principal and unofficial keeper of community wisdom. Morning, Jack, Reuben said, holding a cardboard box. Brought something you might want to see. Jack stepped aside, curious. The girls peeked around him. Reuben set the box on the table and opened it carefully. Inside were faded documents, yellowing photographs, a dusty journal, and a single rusted wrench. "This was your father's," Reuben said, "and your grandfather's before that. They used it to start the original Rowan Auto Garage down by Route 7. Found it when they were clearing out my brother's place." Jack reached into the box, slowly lifting the wrench. Its weight was familiar grounding. "I remember this," he said quietly. "Dad kept it above the register." Reuben nodded. "Figured if anyone could pass it down, it'd be you." Mira leaned in. "Does that mean Jack's famous?" Reuben chuckled. "Not quite. But that wrench has fixed more engines, and maybe more hearts than anyone in this county can count." Jack met his eyes and saw something deeper, a nod of recognition, of legacy. After Reuben left, Jack stood for a long while holding the wrench. Then he carried the box into the garage and placed it on the highest shelf next to a photo of Sarah. The garage had changed too. What was once just a workshop now held signs of a growing home: a coat rack with tiny jackets, a scooter propped against the wall, a pegboard where Mira had taped up a rules of the garage list. Rule No. 1, no yelling. Rule No. 2, candy is allowed if shared. Later that day, Jack met Evelyn at the new town center, where she'd invited him for a favor. The center was still under renovation, an old courthouse being transformed into a multi-purpose community space with a free daycare outreach services and an employment resource room. "I've accepted the director position," Evelyn said. "I'm staying in Sawyer Creek." Jack looked around. "You were going to leave. I'd considered it before, but not now." She smiled. "Turns out this little town has more going for it than I thought." Jack watched her brush a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture quiet and unguarded. She turned to face him. "I want to expand the garage initiative you started, offer mechanical skills classes for teens who age out of the system. You'd run it, of course." He blinked. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." He rubbed his chin. "You're sure you trust a guy with grease under his nails and no college degree to run a program like that?" "I trust a guy who learned how to father two girls with nothing but pancakes, duct tape, and a lot of heart." Jack chuckled softly. "So this is what the rest of life looks like, huh?" Evelyn stepped closer. "Maybe it's what the next part looks like, and maybe you don't have to do it alone." He nodded. Not fast, not out of nerves, but with a quiet kind of knowing. That night back at home, Jack tucked Lila into bed. Mira was already asleep, mouth slightly open, a paperback on her chest. "Daddy," Lila whispered, her voice barely there. Jack leaned down. "Yes, sweetheart." She pointed to the shelf above her bed, where her drawing hung 4 stick figures under a purple roof. "Can we stay like this forever?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he smoothed her blanket and kissed her forehead. "I can't promise forever," he said gently, "but I can promise I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you." She smiled content and curled under the covers. Jack stepped into the hallway and paused at the door to Sarah's room. It had remained untouched for years, a shrine to memory. But tonight he opened it. And then slowly, with care, he removed the photo frames and trinkets from the shelf, the ones that had defined a chapter. He dusted. He cleared space. Not to forget, but to make room. For the life he hadn't seen coming. For the family he never thought he'd have. And for the miracle he hadn't dared to hope would find him again. Spring melted into early summer in Sawyer Creek, and with it came the gentle unfolding of new beginnings, slow, quiet, and no longer chased by fear. The mornings were filled with birdsong and laughter echoing through the once solemn halls of Jack Rowan's house. Where grief once lingered like an oil stain, there was now color, literal and figurative. The girls had painted their room lavender with gold stars on the ceiling. The kitchen fridge had no clean surface, left covered edge to edge in crooked drawings, school calendars, and pancake recipes scribbled in crayon. And on the mantel, in a simple wooden frame, rested a newly signed certificate, final adoption approval, Lila Morrison and Mira Morrison, legal children of Jack Rowan. It wasn't printed on fancy paper. There were no embossed gold seals. But to Jack it was the most sacred document he'd ever held. He'd brought the girls to the courthouse himself. Evelyn had stood beside them, hands steady on his shoulder, her voice firm as she read the final legal oaths. Connor had been there, too quiet, respectful, and supportive, just as he promised. He'd sent the girls a beautiful letter afterward, promising to stay part of their lives in whatever way they wanted. Mira had responded with a postcard that read, "We already have a home, but you can come to our birthday party." It was signed in glitter pen. Now, 3 weeks later, Jack stood outside the garage, a new sign hanging above the door. It still read, Rowan's Repairs, but beneath that freshly added in bold script were the words, and Community Auto Skills for Youth. They were hosting their first open day that morning. Jack had invited half the town and hoped at least 5 people would show up. By 10 a.m., the parking lot was full. Neighbors, friends, former students of Evelyn's teens, curious about engines, parents holding coffee cups and watching from the shade. The garage had been transformed. One half remained a working auto shop. The other half had been gutted, repainted, and lined with workbenches and tool walls labeled with hand-painted signs, spark plugs, wrench station, safety first. Mira wore a tool belt 3 sizes too big and walked around like she ran the place. Lila had set up a donation jar labeled, Help Teddy Get Safety Goggles. Evelyn stood beside Jack, arms crossed, surveying the scene with satisfaction. She wore jeans and a soft blue shirt, casual, confident, more at home than he'd ever seen her. This is going to work, she said. I know, Jack said. I mean, I knew it would, but it feels real now. It's because you stayed, he replied, glancing at her. Evelyn looked over at him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. Most people don't, he added almost to himself. Well, she said, her voice quiet but certain. Sometimes it takes staying still to start growing again. A teenage boy approached, hesitant. He had grease on his hands already and wore a nervous expression. Mr. Rowan, you said you'd show me how to check tire pressure. Jack smiled. I did. Come on. He walked with the boy toward one of the open bays, the June sun warm on his shoulders. Behind him, Evelyn called out to Mira to stop adjusting people's tools unless they asked for help. Lila giggled from the donation table, holding up a paper sign that now read, Teddy raised enough for a toolkit too. The day rolled on like a song. That evening, as twilight wrapped the town in gold and lavender, Jack lit a small fire pit in the backyard. The girls sat beside him, roasting marshmallows, sticky-faced and storytelling. Today was the best day ever, Mira said between bites. Better than the day you let us paint the garage door? Jack raised an eyebrow. The day you painted a unicorn driving a race car. Exactly, she said, grinning. Iconic. Lila leaned against his side, quiet as always, her head resting on his arm. Do you miss your old life? She asked suddenly. Jack thought for a moment. Sometimes. I miss people. I miss what could have been. But I don't miss being alone. Lila nodded. I think this is the life I was supposed to find, he added, even if I didn't know it. The stars blinked into the sky one by one as the last light faded. The girls eventually drifted to bed, wrapped in the scent of wood smoke and dreams. Jack stayed out for a while longer, staring at the coals. Evelyn joined him, bringing 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She didn't speak. She just sat beside him, her presence steady like always. After a long pause, Jack said, You ever think about how it all started? That morning in the alley behind my shop. Evelyn smiled. One act of kindness, one he echoed. That's all it took to change everything. She looked at him. That's all it ever takes. He turned to her. You've become part of this, Evelyn, not just the center, us, me. I know, she said softly. I wanted to be. And then for the first time without hesitation, Jack reached out and took her hand. They sat like that in the quiet beneath the stars. 2 hearts that had been broken wide open and rebuilt, not by miracles from the sky, but by pancakes, purple paint, bedtime stories, and the soft, stubborn power of staying. In the years that followed, people in Sawyer Creek would point to that little garage at the edge of town and tell the story of the mechanic who became a father by accident, by grace, and by choosing to love not because he had to, but because his heart refused not to. And if they listened closely on summer nights when the wind was right, they might still hear laughter floating from the backyard. A miracle not shouted, just lived, every day. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more feel-good healing tales just like this one. There's always another story worth telling and worth feeling. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.